Hello, my name is Amy Spence. This is my oral presentation for the ENC1101 online class taught by Professor Considine. Today I will be analyzing the classic short story, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. The Yellow Wallpaper was originally published in the New England Magazine in January 1892. The Yellow Wallpaper is written in the first-person narrative of a woman's secret journal and her descent into madness. Since it is in the first person, we never really come to learn her name. We find that she has been brought to a manor out in the countryside by her husband John and with her sister-in-law Jenny. She is brought here and to be confined to a room for her nervous depression. It is never stated, but has been long accepted by most people who have read and analyzed the story that the condition she is actually suffering from is postpartum depression. This is believed because there is a reference to a baby. For example, "It is fortunate Mary is so good with the baby. Such a dear baby, and yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous." Unfortunately, back in the 19th century, most mental ailments that plagued women were not taken seriously, and the narrator in this story is no exception. Her husband and brother are both physicians and do not see her condition as severe. She states, "You see, he does not believe I am sick, and what can one do? If a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? My brother is also a physician and also of high standing, and he says the same thing." She is instructed to be locked in a single room for almost all hours of the day and strictly forbidden to work or have any kind of stimulation. Her journal is her secret outlet that she keeps hidden from her husband and her sister-in-law. She originally states that the room she is kept in must have been a nursery, or after that, a gymnasium. She says, "For the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the wall." While reading that passage, I get the feeling that this room has been used as a holding cell for the mentally deranged in the past. The bars on the window may have kept them from escaping or committing suicide, and the rings on the wall might have been used to keep the patients restrained. In her first journal entry, she makes a comment on the yellow wallpaper. The lines the room. She says, "I never saw a worse paper in my life." She goes on to describe how it has such a strange and flamboyant pattern. It has been torn and ripped away in strips randomly throughout the room. She says the color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow, and no wonder the children hated it. I should hate it myself if I have to live in this room long. She already recognizes that the children, or whoever is actually been confined to the room, has torn away at the paper in frustration. As the story progresses, the journal entries start to focus more and more on the yellow wallpaper. She becomes increasingly suspicious and nervous as time goes on. She states, "The fact is, I'm getting a little afraid of John. He seems very queer sometimes, and even Jenny has an inexplicable look." She starts to believe that everyone else is being affected by the wallpaper. "It strikes me occasionally," she says, "just as a scientific hypothesis, that perhaps it is the paper." She sees Jenny and John examining it. I find that they are just trying to figure out what her obsession is with it. In Jenny's case, she's wondering why the yellow wallpaper keeps staining the narrator's clothes. But since the narrator is so affected by the wallpaper, she assumes that the others are being affected by it as well. Eventually, she seems to appear to be getting better. She is sleeping more and not talking as much. John says she seemed to be flourishing in spite of the wallpaper. The narrator doesn't reply to him because she feels she is getting better because of the wallpaper, because she has something to focus her energy on. She starts to believe she can see a woman creeping around the room and manor. I believe that it is really her own reflection that she is seeing, but she has descended so far into madness she cannot tell the difference. She believes that at night the pattern in the wallpaper starts moving. She believes there is a woman, or at times many women, trapped behind the wallpaper. She says the front pattern does move, and no wonder, the woman behind it shakes it. Eventually, the narrator starts to pull and peel away at the wallpaper like occupants of the room in the past have done. She feels that she wants to help the woman who is trapped behind the wallpaper to escape. On the second to last night, while John has gone away on business, she starts to really work at getting rid of the wallpaper. "As soon as it was moonlight," she writes, "and that poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern, I got up and ran to help her. Here she is speaking of the woman she sees behind the wallpaper. I pulled and she shook, I shook and she pulled, and before morning we had peeled off yards of that paper. As the last day approaches, she is simply overcome with her obsession of the wallpaper and getting it off of the walls. She locks herself in the room and tosses the key away. She doesn't even want to go outside. She says, "For outside you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow." She begins to creep around the bottom of the wall, with her shoulder in a groove the former occupant must have made. Finally, John comes back and is attempting to get through the door. She tells him where the key is, and when he enters the room, he cries, "What is the matter? For God's sake, what are you doing?" She responds, "I've got out at last, in spite of you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the paper so you can't put me back." John faints, and the narrator continues her creeping along the wall and steps over him each time. I personally believe that Jane is actually the narrator, that in this last statement, she is speaking as the woman who was trapped behind the wallpaper. Of course, we are not told implicitly who she is or what happens to the narrator after the story ends. We are left to interpret the story our own way. The Yellow Wallpaper is a classic because it is such a chilling tale of a woman's descent into madness. It touches on some key points of how women were treated as second-class citizens and not taken seriously, even if they were very ill. Charlotte Perkins Gilman created a classic short story that continues to entertain and frighten readers over 100 years later.